Okay, well, anyone who listens to our podcast regularly will know how much I've championed Arbelos over the years, and so super pleased tonight to have David Marriott and Toshinari, co-founders of Arbelos, joining me for the show. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Oh, of course. It's no joke. I was going back. I don't know if this is an extremely narcissistic thing to do, but I went back and I started listening to some of our old episodes recently just because it had been 2 years and I kind of forgot what we talked about. And I think Giuseppe Makes a Movie came up either in the first or second episode. And I've just been tracking with y'all for some time. So huge fan of pretty much, yeah, I mean, everything that y'all have put out. So thank you for going on this journey and making some beautiful releases.
Oh, thanks, man. We appreciate it.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of stuff I want to get into, including make sure in case I forget, I really want to get into how you have the best, most luxurious slipcovers in the game.
That's
But
all. That's all.
really, that's awesome. Before we get into all that, I just am curious, like, so Arbelos fills this really interesting niche of films from completely around the world that have a big emotional impact when you see them. Like I think everything y'all have put out has an emotional impact. Um, there's kind of a lot of things that fall under the art house genre. But I feel like y'all are very selective in the films that are really going to drive a pretty hard hitting kind of reaction. So I don't know if that's how you see it, but I would love to hear the story of how Arbelos came about, and as part of that story, just sort of how you think about curation and how you started selecting titles. Because I think, yeah. Anyway, so if, to the extent you can both of those in, otherwise we can make it a bigger conversation. But
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe more interesting to answer the second part first and the first part second.
yeah,
Yeah, like we put a lot of thought into what the acquisitions mandate is going to be because it is obviously really diverse. We're not focused on like one type of film or one national cinema or anything like that. It's, I mean, it sounds boring, but first and foremost, it's like we're a small company. This is like a for the love of the game type of thing. So we have to be really excited about the work. Like it has to be, we have to love it, and that's where it starts. And then sort of beyond that, it's, like there's a lot of companies in our space that are doing a lot of different kinds of things. So I think we always, and jump in if I'm misrepresenting, but I think we were always interested in stuff that's sort of like, it's not in the canon, but it should be. And so our purpose can be to number one, make it look as good as it can. And number two, sort of like change that dynamic, and I think maybe something like the Nina Menkes films, which is, I know this is not video, but you're speaking about slipcases. We're packaging up this cinematic sorceress, the films of Nina Menkes box set right now to ship out. But I think that's a really good example where Nina's making path-breaking work like since the early 90s, and her stuff was at Sundance and all these things. Like it was out there, but when you talk about these sort of canonical filmmakers, especially in like the last 10 years, like maybe Nina's work wasn't being mentioned and it should have been. It's like, why? It's like, okay, well, the work hadn't been restored yet. It wasn't being platformed, there were like the access was difficult. So I think that's a really good sort of example of where we can excel. And so that's sort of the acquisitions mandate. And something like Satan Tango is a different animal because it's obviously, it's on the Sight and Sound poll, has been for a long time. Like people obviously know who Bellatar is. His reputation is justly established. But with that title, it's 7.5 hours long. There was no Blu-ray. The DVD was out of print. It was really hard or impossible to get 35 prints to tour around North America for about a decade. So that was the sort of thing where, because of the restoration workflow and setup that we had, that's where we could sort of excel. So that one is less like we have to establish Bellatar as a canonical filmmaker. Of course not. He's already, there. But that becomes more a question of quality of access. And that's where we could sort of step in.
But I think, okay, and I do want to get into the history of Arbelos, but just on that point, because I think I wanted to talk about Sit and Tango. So since you brought it up, I think there's two level when you talk about canon, right? There's the one that the critics know, the directors that the critics know, and the films that they know. And then there's the films that people who just love film and are curious about film know. And I don't think those are always the same, right? And I think what y'all did with Satan Tango was bring Bellatar from the critics list into a more general discussion about great films. Because when that release came out, I mean, it was Reddit and Instagram and it was flooded with Satan Tango stuff for months.
Yeah, well, that was a big swing for us. Like, obviously, and A can talk about the genesis of that because it really sort of came out of his initiative. Yeah, that was the sort of thing where like the work is so powerful, like you can't deny that film. So I think there was some sense that we always had where it's like to get it out in a new 4K restoration and have it tour, like people will find it. Like the people who are unaware of it, its reputation, like it was just sort of this perfect symmetry of things. But it's not an inexpensive thing. Like the economics of restoring that film were tremendous. So it was easily the riskiest thing we ever did as a company, but also I think is arguably our most I don't know, like successful is not the word, but it's the one that's landed in front of the most people.
It's your Avatar Way of Water.
Yeah, exactly.
You
Yeah, we're
took a
working
big
on
gamble
a
and it
3D version now with Bella. He's very excited about it.
good. Hey,
But
do
yeah,
you
I don't know if
mind?
that answers your question.
Actually, it does, but I'm curious now. Hey, do you mind telling a little bit about the origins of that then? I think that's an interesting story.
Yeah, I mean it starts from like a very consumer level thing where, you know, for all the films that we release, we're just big fans of the filmmakers themselves. So,
Hmm.
Bella is is an idol to for both David and I. But so I was trying to buy the Facets DVD actually, that was
Okay.
out of print, and um I had bought it, but then it turns out that it was out of stock, and I was contacting them, and they had just straight up told me that that their rights had lapsed on the film, so that they couldn't sell it anymore. And then that's when we thought, hey, this is a big chance for us to get involved with this title.
Wow, that's amazing. Are the Facets folks still around? Are they still a company?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I have several of their old DVDs. I haven't thought about that name in a while. I'll have to go check out their catalog. Um,
Yeah, and as
anyways,
far as I know, they still have the Cinematheque going. Yeah, oddly, they had Nina's work as well in like the DVD era. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, that was so A put us on the trail of Bella, and then it was sort of like, how do we find Bella? Like we'd heard these rumblings that he was on email, which seems at the time crazy because you would hear these stories that like his secretary or his assistant would print out emails and like read them to him and then take dictation. I don't know if that's like apocryphal or not. um and so there was this like, I don't know, what was it, like 6 8 months, like there was just like this hunt, and then there were a bunch of like dead email addresses, and we were trying to get him through the school and this and that. And then yeah, and then we finally found him, and it was just very bizarre to get an email from Bellatar, like you know really short too, like long film short emails. It's just sort of like, yes, there are rights, let's talk about it, Bella. Like that was like the note.
Amazing. And so y'all went through the process. Did he actually own the rights? It was him. It wasn't like a production company or something?
Yeah, it was him and his like I don't know, it's like a producer slash lawyer, but yeah, they were
Uh-huh.
essentially with Bella.
Oh,
And then the
wow.
elements were on deposit at the Hungarian National Film Archive. And so that worked out really well. That was sort of felicitous timing because we were also working with them to get Son of the White Mare off the ground. And now we've done
Uh-huh.
subsequently a whole bunch of projects with them, and they're, it's a whole other conversation, but they're like the model for what like a really cool, progressive, forward thinking national film archive can be. Like they're doing really, really tremendous work, and we have like a long, cool partnership. But they didn't have the rights, but they have Film Lab under the
Yeah.
umbrella of the
Uh-huh.
then I think it's the National Film Institute Film Archive now. They rebranded. But it's like the best film archive in Hungary, and so we do the 4K scans. Obviously, Bella very against his negatives leaving, crossing like borders, which is smart.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we had all that sort of scan there, and then migrated those like raw scans to LA where the cleanup happened, and then that went back to Budapest where Bella supervised the color grade. But
Did
yeah,
y'all
it
ever
was.
get to Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
Did you ever get to go to Budapest on the journey?
We didn't get to go to Budapest, but we did get to meet Bella at the Berlin Alley when it premiered there, which was a really like that's a career highlight to be able to sort of be in that space with him watching that. It was done in the original theater where the film had premiered at the Berlin Alley in 1994. The same programmer introduced it. It was this very sort of like ornate 25th anniversary celebration for the film, and that was that was really special.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know the conversation was going to go in this direction, but since you use the term films that are not currently in the canon that should be, although I know Satan Tango doesn't quite fit that description, but I mean, but it just got me thinking, can you do Wojciech Haas next? Because I want to see Saragossa manuscript get a good release. I don't know what's going on with his stuff.
Yeah, that's one of those. If there's a film that's sort of like that iconic, that's like not currently out in a beautiful 4K restoration, there's like, usually a reason. Not
Yeah.
to not to be coy, but yes, we're also great fans of that film.
Okay, cool. Well, I won't ask any more about it, but I hope you're able to clear whatever the blocks are. On the completely other end of the art house spectrum, there was some Indonesian horror films like Lady Terminator and some different ones, some crazy
Yep.
action movies and stuff that had been stuck in kind of rights hell, and there's rumors that they're finally getting cleared up. So maybe this is a good time in history for some of the ones that have been difficult. I hope that's true.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Um,
having the Mother and the Horror come out, I mean, that's not us, obviously. It's a whole other like avenue, but like that's huge. That's like unbelievable that that's happening, because that
yeah,
was like
exactly.
everybody took a run of that for like years and years and years, and to have it in this beautiful like 4K restoration is exciting.
That's awesome. Um, okay, so maybe thank you for going down that Satan Tango rabbit hole. I love hearing those stories. Going back a little bit, so I don't know if you want to start. I have two kind of questions, or maybe they lead into each other. I'd love to learn the kind of path that y'all took to get into to knowing about these films and loving these films. Your kind of film journey as a kid, and then kind of just growing up and seeing how you kind of evolved, and then separately how Arbelos got started. So I don't know, those are however you want to take that, but I'd love to hear both of those.
Yeah, A, do you want to jump in? I feel like I've been running my mouth.
Sure. Trying to think. I guess the first question. Yeah, I have a pretty standard answer. And I went to undergrad at UCSD and studied visual arts there.
Okay.
And that's that. And I always liked films before that, but I think I was more interested in straight narrative films. And then going to school there, you learn a lot more experimental films, art house films, like Babette Mangold was one of my teachers,
Wow.
and Jean-Pierre Gorin. So these kind of you know art house French film directors slash
Yeah.
DPs
Yeah. Yeah.
were teaching there, and it changed my whole perspective on just how to watch films in general. And I think that's when I first heard about Bela Tartu in school. Like, well, one of the guys at schools, he was probably the biggest art house buff there in school, and he was telling me, I'm going up to LA to see the Turin Horse play. And I was, what's that? And
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think I ended up going that time, but that put me on his name was on my radar after that. And then, I mean, working in distribution was, we were talking about Giuseppe. I had seen Giuseppe at a film festival, but also Mike, I had known him, Mike Patton, who's the producer of Giuseppe Makes a Movie. Well, he was actually teaching at UCSD, even though I didn't take his class at the time.
Okay.
But my partner had taken his class, and I loved the movie. I saw it maybe 3-4 times in the theaters, and that was just kind of my connection to Sinalicious as well. And I said, I reached out to Mike and I asked him if there's any way for me to work at Sinalicious, or if he had any connections, and then he introduced me to David. And yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So there's something you said that I want to ask about, because people say this a lot and they gloss over it, but I just realized that I've never actually asked the follow-up question to that. How did you watch films differently after going to like being in that environment? Because you mentioned, like it helped me watch films differently being at UCSD.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
what does that mean? Because I'm always interested, because I think I don't have any formal training. I just kind of watch movies and kind of go by how they emotionally impact me. And I am always feel like I'm missing out on the reasons that people love a lot of the classics for the composition, the shadowing, or all these things that I haven't been trained on. Is it that kind of stuff, or how did you watch films
Mm,
differently?
the composition part, I think I always had a liking for certain aesthetics, even before UCSD. But it's almost as if like they're just hammering these types of films at you constantly. So
Okay.
I think you're just slowly start to see different things in these types of films that you had never seen before, and then you start to appreciate them. Yeah, because
Yeah.
even still, like a lot of those films that we saw in school were pretty tough to watch, and I think I fell asleep in a lot of them too. But um, you know, but I think it's just I think about those films a lot, um, and yeah, I don't know if I can really answer why uh I love them so much, but it's just those types of films really stuck with me
Yeah.
a lot more than other types of movies. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. It's almost like you're not that your brain has changed. It's just like by exposure to so many different types of films, you almost get like your aperture opens up and you kind of really get a sense of what you like or something, as opposed to before was like just a smaller, sampling.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, decided. What about you?
I'm also a film school kid. I'm Canadian. I grew up in Montreal, and went to Concordia for film production, actually. But that program, at the time, I assume it's still run the same way. But this was sort of pre-digital revolution, so we were like editing on Steambex and shooting on Bolexes and doing like 16 millimeter like neg cuts and stuff like that. So I think they
Okay.
probably reconfigured what that program is substantially since I was there. But that film production program was heavily supplemented with classes in the film studies department. And so I sort of like what Dave's talking about went through. Like I was a cinephile as a kid, but I was also a TV kid. So a lot of what I saw was what was programmed on television, which
Mm,
is, I think, I'm 37, so this would have been like in the early 90s. I think a lot of people who are like, I saw the classics on TV are usually like 20 or 30 years older than me.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But there was a station there called Bravo, which I don't know if that exists in the States.
Yeah, I think so. I'm sure it's the same one.
Yeah, and they did a thing that was great where every Sunday morning they just, I don't know who was programming that thing, but it would go like you would start at 7 a.m. with like the Philadelphia story, and then there would be like In a Lonely Place, and then you would watch like Two-Lane Blacktop. Like it was the best
Wow.
film school ever. Like it really was highly formative to me. And then I was also really obsessed with this old NBC show called Homicide: Life on the Street that I hope gets a really nice deluxe restoration Blu-ray treatment one day, because the early seasons of that are just unbelievable. And it
Yep.
was all shot like 60 millimeter bypass, bleach bypass, and was heavily influenced by like documentary new wave editing, and so I had all this stuff kind of cooking going in with that. And then film school kind of opened the floodgates for like European, like quintessential European art house cinema and beyond. And
Okay.
so it was sort of like those two streams, I think, were really what programmed my brain for this sort of stuff. And then it was sort of a constant evolution after that. And
And
then
then,
I stayed. Sorry, yeah.
yeah, no, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah. And then I stayed in Montreal. I started a couple of like film series there, and then moved to Vancouver very briefly, and then came to Los Angeles to go to grad school at UCLA, and their what was then called the Moving Image Archive Studies program, sort of like restoration
Uh,
school, archive restoration school. And yeah, it was from that I ended up um, interning around at different places, LACMA, Museum of Modern Art, and eventually at Cinelicious. And then that kind of quickly turned into a full-time job at that company right when it was sort of getting off the ground in the very early days.
that's fascinating. And so Cinelicious has naturally kind of evolved into Arbelos because a lot of it is this, I guess you and A now are running it. Was that just a natural progression between the two companies then?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, Cinelicious was this guy who had like a kind of a thriving post-production, boutique post-production business who was interested in getting into film restoration and distribution. And that was sort of the genesis of it. And then yeah, that was a cool company for a lot of years. And then things sort of changed there. And then I was sort of I was quite keen to sort of keep the business model alive and sort of make sure a lot of these films that we had restored there did not sort of fall off the table, so to speak,
Yeah, yeah.
and so, I got together sort of like the core people that were running Cinelicious Picks, the distribution arm at the time, was like, we should do our own thing. That eventually became Arbelos, which launched in May of 2017. And then we sort of went back and took that Cinelicious library with us and then continued to acquire things that were, Arbelos films in their own right, which started with The Last Movie. It was our first Arbelos film.
Yeah, yeah, I think I've been saying the name wrong this whole time. Sorry, you're saying Arbelos. Sorry.
No, there's no definitive pronunciation. Like even
Okay.
within, like, there's Arbelos and there's Arbelos, and they're both correct.
Okay. All right. Just making sure. Well, before we get into Arbelos films, I want to stay in Cinelicious for just a second because the four that I own, and if there's more that are out there that I missed, apologies. I thought but Giuseppe Makes a Movie, Belladonna Sadness, Private Property, and Funeral Parade of Roses. So these are the four that I own from that effort. And holy cow, like every single one of these films is unbelievable. Like, so I'm sure everybody, if anybody hasn't seen Belladonna Sadness, this to me is like up there with in that category of films that is worth, like everybody should see, but is also extremely hard to see.
Hmm.
Like, like it's so gut wrenching to watch, but it's worth it.
Yeah, it's not an easy watch, that's for sure.
I've never seen an animation style like this before. I mean, I'm not into anime and stuff, so maybe it's just my lack of exposure, but I've never, like, the way that they'll maybe, like zoom in and just focus on like parts of the frame, or kind of
Mhm.
make it to where it's super simple animation with just like three colors for a moment, and then flash in with like the really complex animation and just kind of go weave between the different styles. I've never, it, like the, oh, it's beautiful. Like, and I heard that the production on this, because this is one of the ones we were talking to Craig about when we first came on, and he mentioned that I think it was this one, there's like $150,000 to restore or something crazy like that.
Yeah, no, it was a huge it was a huge undertaking. Absolutely.
Amazing. Um, and then from there, I don't know, it's hard to like hype Private Property up, but what a movie. Like, I mean, hard to prop it up in the sense like nothing like super dramatic happens. It's not like Bella, but it's just such an amazing, well told story. Like, I loved it. Like, I was hooked the whole time.
Oh, I have tremendous affection for that. That one actually came about. So before I ended up at Synalicious, I was in my final year of grad school at UCLA. Um, as one might expect, I interned at the UCLA Film and Television Archive when they used to have their lab on Seward Street. Now they're in the Phi Stoa, in this
Yeah.
like beautiful facility. But before they were sort of like a little more kind of splintered in terms of where the facilities were. So I just bounce around and just sort of like learned how this like analog film preservation happened. It was this really cool couple months there. But they would have like QC screenings for different things that they were working on, and they were working on Private Property, this like photochemical preservation, as distinct from the 4K digital restoration that we ended up doing.
Okay.
But I would just sit in on these things as I was around.
Yeah.
Knew nothing about it going in. Didn't even know Warren Oates was in it. That was an exciting surprise because I'm obsessed with
Uh-huh.
Warren Oates. I just sat down and watched this thing, and it just cooked my brain. Like, I couldn't believe this existed. I couldn't believe that no one knew about it. It was just
Yeah.
totally kind of mind blowing to me. So I ended up at Synalicious maybe like 6-7 months later. Like, that was like the first thing I was like, we should really consider this. Like, this could really pop. Um, and it did, which is exciting. Like, that ended up being a thing that premiered at, I believe, Lincoln Center in New York, and they built a whole Warren Oates retro around it. So there was all this like kind of wonderful
Wow.
context, and like it was a real event. And then the filmmaker's daughter ended up kind of calling us after that,
No
which was
way.
great because her name is,
Yeah.
Leslie Stevens is the filmmaker. His daughter's name is Dana Stevens. Dana Stevens is also, as you might know, like a very well known film critic for Slate and
Yeah.
does podcasts and
Yeah.
stuff. So I got this cold call at the Synalicious offices one day, like reception call. It was like, Dana Stevens is on the phone for you. And I was like, oh, like I naturally assumed it was a film critic and got excited because like, I don't know Dana Stevens, but I like her work. And then
Uh-huh.
it was Leslie Stevens' daughter, totally different person, who was just like, yeah, I was at the screening in New York, and like it was so amazing to see the film. I never thought I would see it again. And since Leslie Stevens had shot that whole film in his actual house, his daughter had
Uh-huh.
grown up there. So she was just sort of like, yeah, like I remember that room. Like that's where we would have
Yeah.
breakfast. Like it was really trippy and cool.
Wow.
But yeah, I
What?
love that. And it's been kind of a like an evergreen title for us. Like there is an audience. It's kind of low level, but it's consistent, and people really talk. It ended up having a remake that came out a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, which is really wild.
Wait, what was
Um,
it? Is it also called Private Property?
it's also called Private Property. It's a remake of the film. It hews very kind of closely
No
to
shit.
the narrative of the Leslie Stevens film.
I'll have to go check it out. I had no idea.
Yeah,
What
it's
was the
awesome.
story about it? And I'm sorry if I didn't see the there's a video interview on here, so I don't know if this talks about this, but what's the story with it being lost for 50 years? Like, was it like where was it lost, or how did it get found?
I think it's just a lot of some films that are not produced by studios. Like that was produced
Oh, okay.
independently, and like a lot of those films just sort of can fall off the grid if there's not, an active steward for that work
Yeah.
over the
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
And so, I mean, the folks at UCLA would need to kind of fill in the blanks here. But as I understand it, obviously UCLA takes in a tremendous amount of material, and then it takes a while to get it processed. And this was, private property. The camera negatives were part of this large donation that they'd received. And so it kind of happened that way.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome.
I hope I'm getting that
Um,
right. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But yeah, we definitely can't take credit for like discovering it. I saw it. UCLA had already kind of preserved it. It was like, oh, we could do something really cool with this and help it get maybe even like an even larger audience.
well, that's kind of one question I have. Maybe this is a natural detour into one of these things. I'm curious from your perspective because it feels like to me, again, I'm just on the outside, but it feels like your titles sell well. The actual Blu-rays sell well, and and obviously, you talk about your theatrical runs. I'm really happy to hear that they do well in that as well. But I've been collecting for about 20 years. We're similar in age. I have you by a few years. I just turned 40, but I was
Congrats.
around kind of, yeah, thanks. In the early 2000s when I feel like everybody owned DVDs, right? It wasn't like, it was just a matter of what kind of DVDs do you own, but like everybody had them.
Mhm.
And there was so much stuff coming out. But in that, I feel like there was this kind of band of films that didn't get released because it was a true business. And so people made these kind of like business decisions around the movies they released, right?
Mhm.
And so now we're getting into this phase. And I'm curious if y'all are seeing this where a lot of films are getting either the first release on disc or first release in 20 years or 15 years. And it seems like in a way, because we're in this collector's market now, it's almost better for preservation in a weird way. Like at least the films are getting a chance to get restored and owned by 2,000 people or 5,000 people. If at least, I don't know, are you seeing a similar trend from your side?
Yeah, Hey, do you want to answer that? Do you
Yeah.
want me to?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially the beginning of COVID, um, sales really increased for us because
Good.
of, I think it's because people were just stuck at home, and then and I guess they also got the government money as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, Blu-rays definitely have become a lot steadier than when we first started. Even when I started was 2015 at Cinelicious. So yeah, it's been a growing trend every year. So I see that as well.
That's
Yeah,
great.
it's an
Yeah.
interesting thing. I mean, you kind of nailed it. Like you like the market, like if you're taking this sort of like macro level view of it, like of course the market has like collapsed for physical media, but when you sort of telescope in on the thing, it's like actually, yeah, but that's like if you're trying to release, like whatever tent pole thing, or maybe those are even doing well
Mhm.
now, but for the longest time, especially, it's kind of started percolating a few years before the pandemic, and then as A said, the pandemic really kind of accentuated it. The collector's market, like you can do really interesting things there. Like it's a we're becoming, every year that passes, we're becoming more and more of a physical media company. Like we do a lot of different things, but we started in more of a streaming space, and then it was sort of 50-50, and now it's almost like maybe Blu-ray sort of like edging ahead a little bit.
Oh, that's exciting
Um,
to hear, especially when you're producing a high quality. Okay, so I don't know if this is like the perfect segue, but I think it's a time. Speaking of physical media, can you tell the story of these silky, luxurious slipcovers? Like, I'm not even trying to just like suck up to y'all. Like, these are the best slipcovers in the game. I almost want to like wear them. Like, how did y'all come up with this design? It's not just paper. Like, what is it, and like, how did you come up with it? I love it.
We work with the local printing house called Nonstop.
Okay.
And when we approached them, we had asked we were looking to do slipcovers because we had never done them.
Mhm.
And we saw the Vinegar Syndrome model, and it's pretty interesting, but we wanted to make it unique as well. And they had done another project that does this sort of envelope style thing. And these are yes, the Satan the first three, the Satan Tango, Son of the White Mare, and Damnation ones are all based off of the same paper, but they have different coatings on them.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, the Satan Tango one is called Sandy Matte, and yeah, as you can tell, it's
Oh, so yes, it is kind of sandy. That's right. Yeah.
and then this is more of a kind of velvety texture, the Son of the White Mare one. I think in my head, I think the textures fit the film. I don't know if it's
That's
actually true,
awesome.
but it's but and then each time we try to kind of up the game to make it more interesting. So me and this guy named Lehman, who runs Nonstop, we're always going back and forth what we can do next. Yeah. And then so for the animations, yeah, it's just exciting to do these sort of things because it's a physical product and you can see it. And he sends us mock-up so we can just see different variations of each slipcase and trying to find the right material. And yeah, this one's also sandy matte, but with the like a gloss texture over it. And
Okay, that makes sense. So it's regular paper, but it has a coating, and the coating changes depending on kind of your vibe for the film and what you
yeah,
want to do for the film.
yeah, exactly.
That is such an
Although I guess
amazing
now
like amount of detail.
sorry to talk over you, with the Nina set now we changed the paper as well, which might be interesting to talk about.
Yeah, so for the Nina's one, it's
Sorry, the Nina Menke set. The Nina set.
Nina-
It's like,
Nina
we're all
Menke
friends
set.
with Nina.
Yeah, this one is because all the other ones, as you it's if you open it, it's actually just white paper. But
yeah.
for this one, it's the same color all the way. I know this
Okay.
is a podcast, so you can't really see it,
No, no.
but it's a place called Color Plan, and it's a new type of texture, and it holds better as well, keeps it more rigid shape, and I really like
Wow.
that. This new holographic. I don't know if you can tell, but
A little bit. I bet it's gonna be better in person, but
yeah,
that is such a beautiful cover though. There's a simplicity in y'all's design that I think also helps. Because I think when I think of like canonical films, it's weird to have a busy cover with that, right? Like I like the simple design. Like I think it matches the spirit of it.
yeah. We work really closely with a graphic designer named Dylan Haley, and he's done everything from Cinelicious days. So
Okay,
yeah, so it's all him.
that's great.
But I think you hit on sort of an interesting, like, larger point too, which is, we're conscious of leading with the work. It's sort of
Yeah.
like, I don't know. The idea is never that our personalities will in any way eclipse the work. The design shouldn't eclipse the work. Like, you lead with the film, and everything sort of supports that. And that's how we approach it and what the model always is. I think you can sort of see that in the design being more minimal or more spare. Like, it's not, the work is the thing that delivers, and everything that we're doing is to properly contextualize it, make it exciting, and support it. But we're never trying to eclipse it, if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. And I think it goes back to your first point of starting from a place of loving the films, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's almost like you have to know the films in order to be able to do what you just said. Speaking of knowing the films, so I think I either love this movie or am neutral. Well, you can't be neutral on this movie, but the last movie, I'm going to see it again because the first time through, I was just like, I can't tell if he's a genius or if he's just drugged out of his mind. But
Yeah.
what an experience!
What was wild about that is, so as you might imagine, when we're producing these new 4K restorations, you see the film, which is an insane amount of times,
Yeah.
just over and over again, especially when you're doing like the color grading pass. And the last movie is one of those instances where obviously, like, the DOP is no longer around, Dennis Hopper is no longer around. So, we did have there was a print at the Academy Film Archive that had been supervised by Dennis and the DP. So we kind of had a screening of that and had the colorists there to sort of like see what that looked like. But
Okay.
the camera negative by that point had been pretty faded, and that print had been struck pre the digital revolution. So you were sort of left with a lot of the legacy of the fading in there that with those analog tools you couldn't really do that much with. So it was both helpful and also a little, like, potentially misleading.
Okay.
All of which is just to sort of say that the color work on that was very long and very involved in a lot of different passes. So we saw the last movie, I don't know, easily like maybe 50 or 60 times at
Oh,
least
wow.
in restoring that. And, and I'd always just mention, it's like, even if a film, no matter how much you love a film, you're going to see it 60 times in the course of a couple of months, you're going to start to get kind of sick of it probably.
Yeah.
The last movie just continued to reveal itself in these different ways. Like, you just liked it more every time you would see it.
Wow.
And I think maybe that's the best testament to its brilliance, because I think that is, your reaction is totally valid. And I think how everybody kind of feels the first time you see it. Like it's a lot and it's dense and it's mystifying, and you're like, is he just high and drunk on Godard? Like, is there anything of merit here? And then the more you sit with it, the more you see it, it's like, oh, I think there absolutely is. And I think there's a like a native brilliance to it that's very much Dennis Hopper's. I mean, that's my opinion, but it definitely rewards repeated viewings.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always said it was sort of like if Godard and Jodorowsky somehow had a child, and that
Yeah,
child did some drugs or something like that. I don't know, but um,
yeah.
and that child probably would do some drugs. But anyways, I'm just so fascinated by it. Okay, cool. Well, so I'm staring at, let's see, 4 here and then 5 here, so 9, 10 movies so far. You have Nina Monkey's set coming out. And then you said you have an announcement that's pending, which, I mean, I won't ask about it, but that would be, I'm assuming, release number 11.
For physical now, so we have, yeah, if we're going to track it by like the physical releases, which not everything from Cinelicious got, but everything through Arbelos has, and will continue to receive physical releases. So we have Cinematic Sorceress, the films of Nita Menkes, the box set. Then it'll be the special edition for Wendell Harris's Chameleon Street we're working
Okay.
on now. Speaking of the slipcases, that's as an elliptical deep tease. The A's got something cool cooking on that one, so it'll be a very very pretty
Well,
set.
hopefully we're still like testing beta testing to see if it'll actually work, but yeah, it'll be
Oh,
pretty
wow.
cool.
I
And
can't wait.
that of
Okay.
course, like Wendell is an utterly brilliant and singular multi-hyphenate genius. So working on that was wild and great, and a career highlight. And then after Chameleon Street, we'll have Life's Cheap but Toilet Paper is Expensive, the Wayne Wenning
Oh,
film
yeah, that's right. That's right.
that just finished its sort of theatrical tour, and it'll have a physical media and a streaming life. We toured Mireille Dansereau's Dream Life, the Québécois film from 1972. So
Okay.
that one will actually come out through our sister company, Canadian International Pictures,
Okay.
and that'll have a special edition release that way. And then I think the last one we can talk about officially is To Duo, which A really
Mhm.
championed and can talk about a little bit.
Yeah, Two Dude had its theatrical run at the very end of last year, and then it played at the American Cinematheque here or in LA. And yeah, so that would be probably late end of this year, or even maybe early 2024, but
Okay.
hopefully the end of this year. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So that seems like y'all are kind of putting out somewhere in the ballpark of 2 to 4 releases a year, on Blu-ray at least. Is that kind of the cadence that you're going to try to keep up? You have any plans to go do more? I'm just greedy for more. Is the only thing behind my question.
No, that's kind of you. Yeah, I think like 2 to 4, maybe a little bit closer to 4 is probably a safe bet. I mean, we're
Okay.
built out. Arbelos as the company has a big sort of like international distribution dimension, and so that, as you might imagine, becomes sort of time consuming. We sub-license a lot of the films and the restorations that we work on or require to
Mm,
different other labels in different countries sort of around the world. And so as a consequence of that, there's only 2 of us doing the company, so there's only so many hours in the day. So I think because of that, and also like we remain really committed to having a theatrical life as best we can for everything that we're doing, and that also is fairly time consuming. So
sure.
yeah, it ends up being about 2 to 4 but we have the bandwidth to produce every
Okay.
year, because we don't really want to do anything half-assed. Like we want to be able to sort of put our names behind everything. So we're always very conscious of not taking on more than we can do properly.
Well, the dedication to quality is apparent. So, um, I'll be patient.
I mean, it would make more economic sense to do more, but I think we'd rather make sure everything is like a 10 out of 10 in our eyes before we put it out in the world.
That's great. So that, I think by way of intro, that covers pretty much what I wanted to learn about y'all and the company. Um, is there a place you prefer people to buy? Is it nice to buy from your website? How do you want people to buy from you?
Yeah, website, our online shop would be great. um yeah, I mean, or if you could just buy it other places as well, but
Yeah, you get to keep more if they buy direct, right?
yes.
which funds
Yeah,
bigger and more ambitious projects and better slipcovers.
Yeah.
1,000%. Also, if you buy it from us, we send it to you. So, you can't tell that, but you get the extra bit of love that, it was packaged by one of us and sent to you from, roughly the eastish side of Los Angeles where we both live.
That's awesome. Yeah, I am jealous that y'all live in LA. This is, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I love food and all foods of all cuisine of all parts of the world, and I feel like LA has quite an amazing food scene. So I'm jealous that y'all get to live there.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can deal with the sort of the suffocating heat for like 8 months out of the year now, it's then you're golden because everything else is pretty great.
Austin was worse when we were.
I guess that's true.
when
What
we
am I
were there
talking to you
last
about
time.
heat for? Sorry, yeah, that was really oblivious of me. So yeah, you're great. You're built for it. You can come here.
Yeah,
What's funny, A and
no,
I both live in Los Angeles, and this I guess ties into the slipcases because we, once everything has sort of been like constructed and the back and forth with A and Lehman has happened, like somebody has to pick up the stuff, and
yeah.
neither A nor I drive, so it's always like in some ways the most like logistically difficult part is just sort of like how do we actually physically pick up the thing and bring it to where we package it.
That's hilarious. Modern day challenges. Well, where is the best place for people to reach you on social if they want to ask questions or recommend Vostra Chas box sets?
Yeah, our website's arbelosfilms.com, and we're Arbelos Films on, all the regular places that you would find us, like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have no TikTok as of yet.
Probably
Maybe
for the
that's
best.
maybe that's the future.
No, not if it decreases the amount of releases you do every year. Stay off of it so you can do
Yeah,
more
exactly.
work.
Yeah, another right, another platform to keep up with.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for this. It's really been a pleasure talking to you both, and I wish you wild success.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for
Thank
inviting
you.
us to do it. This was a total pleasure. Appreciate the support.
Of course, of course. All right. Well, all right. See you online.